If you've ever started a training build feeling motivated and optimistic, and then found yourself sore, banged up, or questioning your decisions a couple of weeks in, this will probably sound familiar. So, how do you start a training build without screwing it up in the first few weeks or just throwing it away altogether? That's what I want to talk through here because I'm 3 weeks into the running side of my training right now, and even with a pretty conservative start, I've already been reminded how easy it is to overdo things without meaning to. So, long story short, in my first week of my training build for my muscular endurance work, I ran up my usual mountain trails or hiked up my usual mountain trails, carrying an extra 20 pounds on my back with a rucking pack and rucking plates. But that bothered my back and my shoulders a little too much. So I needed to find a way to get that same heavy training stimulus in my legs without taxing my heart rate or my cardio demand as much. So in week 2, I decided to revisit some stair training that I haven't done for, I think, about 6 years. I used to use this particular set of stairs. It's 358 steps, kind of winding stairway with a residential area at the top and a trail along the bottom. I decided to revisit that during the middle of my second week to get that demand without having to carry the extra load, and it sure worked as far as putting the demand through my legs, but blew up my calves really bad. My calves were super sore and stiff, which I knew from history, training with the stairs and taking other people to train on the stairs. I was fully expecting to be sore, but I had hoped with the last few years of training history that I have doing other stuff that maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But yeah, it was. It was really, really bad. It took a solid 5, 6 days to feel like semi-normal again. So they kind of recovered just in time for me to hit the stairs again last week, or sorry, this week. But I went into it with a little bit of a different approach, knowing that, after reintroducing that kind of novel stimulus to my calves in the previous week, that this week they probably would be able to tolerate it a little better. Thankfully, that is kind of how it played out. So the moral of the story there was that it wasn't necessarily that the decision to do the stair training was wrong, or even that the number of, well, probably the number of sets was excessive. I did 6 sets that first week, thinking that was reasonable because in my previous training on the stairs, I had built up to as many as, well, pretty regularly doing 10 sets. I remember I did one session where I did 15 in a row and I suffered no consequences, but hadn't done them in 6 years. So my body wasn't quite ready for it. But sure enough, keeping a cool head about it, not freaking out, going back and approaching that same workload slightly differently. I did a bit more of a warm up before hitting the stairs and kind of broke it up into 2 sets of 3 with a little bit of trail running in between, and then finishing with a proper cool down, which I rarely do. That seemed to get me through it a lot more successfully. So that's part of this more structured approach that I'm taking to my training this year, as opposed to the last couple of years. And it's kind of ironic that I usually don't have much of a structure to my training when it comes to this endurance stuff and running, because, I am a trainer by profession and my whole job is providing structure in training for my clients. And with, training in the gym, I tend to do things in a very structured way. But over the last few years, my training when it comes to running has been a really ad hoc kind of approach. And it worked pretty well for me in my build up to my first ever ultra, which was the 2024 Spartan Race Kelowna Ultra. It was snowing in Kelowna in late August. Who knew? That was my 50th birthday. Happy birthday to me. But, it went pretty well. Finished about 2 hours faster than I had anticipated, managed second in my age group. And then last year, I did the first run through of the project that I'm doing this build for, which is my solstice run, running from sunrise to sunset on the summer solstice for about 16 hours. This past year, I managed 92 kilometers. This year, the goals are a little bit different. I'll talk about that another time. But the buildup for both of those was basically just try and run a little further every week and keep building up until something breaks, and then do nothing, recover for a week or however long it took me to be able to get back on my feet and start running again. This year, I'm going to be taking a much more structured approach. I'm in my early 50s. The kind of time that it takes me to recover from issues is a lot longer. If I have any injuries, if I roll an ankle, if I strain my calf muscle, if I do all those kind of things, I can't bounce back as quickly as I would like. So I'm taking a more structured approach. The thing that really highlighted the need for being more deliberate about this sort of thing for me was my Movember fundraising project, where I ran every day in November, ended up totaling just over 510 kilometers during the month and raising $1,700 for the charity. While it was successful from that point of view, I was completely destroyed by the end, like physically just wrecked, mentally, emotionally, totally drained. My body and my brain just couldn't take the workload because I, jumped into that and just went hard for a month straight without any real plan and without a proper build up towards it. So I'm going to take a more structured approach this year. So, like I said, I'm approaching the end of week 3 of this build-up. My run today was a test run on my full solstice loop. I wanted to run it just to get an accurate read for the distance and the elevation, and it overall went pretty well. My overall pace was surprisingly a little quicker than I anticipated, which on the one hand is good, but it's not reflective of where I'm going to be on the day, because today I did one loop, but on the solstice run, I'm planning to try and run 100 kilometers in 16 hours, which means doing that 16-kilometer loop 6 times plus a little bit extra at the end. So it's going to be pretty spicy. Um, and I wasn't that much faster than what I need to average for 6 loops on the day to be able to achieve that goal. So I still have a lot of work to do in the next 20 weeks. So after my week's long run, which is coming up tomorrow on the mountain, I'm going to be running about 24 kilometers, and that should end up being a little over 1,000 meters of elevation, maybe 1,200. Once I get through that, I'll have a rest day on Sunday, and then next week is actually a planned deload week, which I've never done when it comes to my running training. As I said, uh, it was always just run a little further until something breaks. That was my plan before. Next week, I'm going to cut the mileage down by about half, and then paired with that, I'm going to use that deload week as a good time to introduce the strength training component of my training, which will also be a new addition, in contrast to what I always tell my clients to do and try and do a little bit of everything to be well rounded. These past few years, I've been a bit of a hypocrite when it comes to that, because my focus has been so much on just building up my running mileage that I've just never had the time, or never made the time, I should say, to do the strength training piece as well. This year, I'm trying to walk the talk a little more and do a bit of both. So next week, I'll be reintroducing the strength training component to my training, and then the week after, we'll be returning to higher run mileage and keeping the strength training in there as a planned component. That's it for this first intro to this series. The series is basically going to document my preparation for a big project that I have coming up later this year, my solstice run, plus another thing that I'm going to be doing after, but we'll talk about that in the next video. So if you've gotten this far, thank you for watching, and stay tuned.